Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another weekly forecast. This one is for Monday, February 10th, all the way through to Sunday, February 16th of 2020. And this week we have Mercury stationing to go retrograde. And up until that point, which actually happens on Sunday on the 16th, there's sort of this weird lull where there's not a lot going on in the astrology. So there's kind of this like slow energy where it's almost like there's just not a lot of action building up to the Mercury retrograde, which is kind of an interesting thing. But the energy of that Mercury station is just going to be made that much more powerful because it's going to really be the focal point of the week. And we're really going to be feeling the energy of Mercury stationing or slowing down to station throughout the week a little bit more so than we normally would, just because there's not a lot of planetary action going on to distract us from, really understanding how this Mercury retrograde is affecting us and really, being impacted by that. So, on the one hand, it's nice that there's not a lot of craziness as Mercury is slowing down to station retrograde. On the other hand, I think that it's going to make the Mercury retrograde energy much more apparent for a lot of people. That being said, this Mercury retrograde is not going to be the worst Mercury retrograde ever. Mercury is at its detriment, retrograding in the sign of Pisces, which means that it's in the sign that opposes one of its home signs, which would be Virgo. And so Mercury already doesn't operate very effectively in the sign of Pisces, but Mercury retrograde in Pisces, it's kind of a fitting energy because Mercury in Pisces is an energy that doesn't think as logically or in a linear fashion. It's more, thinking and sensing the world or sensing things about the world in terms of visions, impressions, feelings, and sensations. It's a very intuitive sort of thought process that is more abstract, right? As opposed to being planned out and step by step and really rational. Really great ideas can come while Mercury is in the sign of Pisces, but they come in this sort of big grand picture where it's almost like fully formed and you can feel it and sense it. And there's a lot of visuals and symbology around it that can be very difficult for people to communicate in a way that's direct and that's easy to understand. And so there's already an issue with miscommunication there, but this is really great for creative thinking and for creative self-expression through communication. So expressing yourself in terms of describing things symbolically or in visuals or metaphor, things of that nature. Also tapping into your intuition and expressing that, maybe not in the clearest of ways, but it is an introspective energy in and of itself, and an energy that is, again, prone to being misunderstood. So that is going to be a bigger theme during this Mercury retrograde, feeling lied to, unintentionally lying to people, or finding out that you've been deceived in some way or you've been deceiving yourself. That will be a major theme when you kind of go back and review the energies associated with the placement of this Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, which we'll talk about when we get to the forecast for all 12 rising signs. But the big thing here is going to be, how do we utilize this energy, right? We use it creatively, we use it intuitively, we use it for relaxation and introspection, as opposed to trying to convey knowledge in a way that's very logical, linear, rational, packaged in that really nice sort of way, and conveying knowledge in a different way, right? And so that's going to be part of this energy here. Also, this is a very compassionate energy, so we'll be thinking much more compassionately about our plans for the future. And when we go back and review things or redo or re-edit or revise something in our lives, we'll be doing so more empathically, more intuitively, and more compassionately. So those are all, positive things. Typically, when Mercury is retrograding in Pisces, and it's actually stationing in a close conjunction with Neptune, which we'll talk about, not exact, but within a few degrees. And so that's going to be part of this station energy, where this can be an extra confusing time for a lot of people with Mercury stations right now. However, for the most part throughout this Mercury retrograde, it's going to be Mercury's going to be making a lot of really positive supportive aspects. And so Mercury will, of course, go cazimi as it always does on March 25th. Mercury will sextile Mars. I think last time around it might have squared Mars, which made it more difficult. Mercury will sextile Uranus, and then Mercury will retrograde back into Aquarius. And so really what this is going to be in this forecast is a general forecast for most of the Mercury retrograde. We'll cover Mercury retrograding back into Aquarius when that happens, the week of March 4th. But actually, and I'm looking at my notes and what I sent out for the weekly Astro-Highlights, and I actually put the dates March instead of February for a lot of these. So I'm already retrograding, right? This is going to be stationing in a close opposition to my sun. Last year it was more exact, so that would have been more challenging. But anyway, so the main takeaway from this is that this is not the worst Mercury retrograde. It's a good time to relax, to rest your brain, to spend time in meditation, contemplation, to take a mental vacation as much as you possibly can. If you are somebody who is more of a creative type or who writes or does something involving creative communication in some form, this is going to be a really great time for you. And if you're somebody who already is natally a Mercury retrograde person, so if you have Mercury retrograde in the birth chart, now is a time where you can, you're going to have a little bit of an easier time. Maybe that Mercury in Pisces doesn't make things super clear for you. However, if you are a natal Mercury retrograde person, the typical Mercury retrograde rules don't really apply to you. And so for those who are not familiar, who are maybe just getting started with their understanding of astrology, when Mercury is in retrograde, it's not the best time to initiate important communications. It's a better time to go back and revisit and revise and reformat important ideas, communications, written work, things like that. It's not the best time to initiate new contracts or agreements, especially in written form, to sign things, right? That's Mercury, your signature. But it is a good time to go back and revise different contracts and agreements and things of that nature. And so that'll be related, of course, to the area of your life that's being impacted by this particular Mercury retrograde. People say not to make major purchases during this time. I would have to agree. Even minor purchases seem to go a little bit awry. But again, if you are a natal Mercury retrograde person, this could be a time where you're going to be thinking more clearly. You're going to form better contracts and agreements that benefit you. And if you're going into like a mutual agreement between two people, you want them both to be Mercury retrograde people. Otherwise, it's not going to work in the same fashion. I've had circumstances where clients have come to me and said, oh, I have to do this really important thing. Is it going to be okay at this time? And like literally everyone involved is a Mercury retrograde person. That shows me that this is the right time and that it's almost like fated that you should do that. But if one person is a Mercury retrograde person and the other person is a Mercury direct person in their birth chart, that person who has Mercury direct is not going to benefit in the same way. So one of the things that you can do to mitigate that, if you do have to do like some sort of mutual contract together with somebody else to take action and you want both parties to benefit, is to have the Mercury retrograde person be like the leader and in planning and organizing and really putting together the contract and the agreement. Maybe they're the first to sign it or something like that too. So there's ways to mitigate this. But anyway, the general energy though is that you don't want to do those things. Travel plans, you have to just plan for delays. Mercury retrograde is not the big, crazy, horrible thing that people sometimes hype it up to be, especially in popular astrology, but it is annoying. Your car might break down. You might have unexpected traffic or delays in travel, like if you're flying somewhere, or you can have miscommunications that mess up your schedule and your plans. Little things can go awry when it comes to like your computer or emails. You want to double and triple check everything that's written, even right now in the shadow period. And so, as long as you're doing all of those things, you should be able to navigate this quite effectively, especially because this Mercury retrograde isn't quite as dramatic as some of the other ones have been, even the one that was last year in Pisces. So that's kind of where we're at with all of this. And so we're going to get into the forecast for all 12 signs, beginning with Aries. But before we do, I have a really exciting announcement. So I am doing my my small group foundational astrology course. The next course begins on April 3rd, and the registration is now open to all of you. Only 12 people are allowed to take this course because I keep it very small and interactive and intimate, so that way we can all interact and learn. You can practice in real time and get feedback. You can practice on your own, on other people's charts, and have your own chart read. And I do quizzes and give feedback on all this. So it's very personalized in this small group setting, which is kind of rare to come by these days when it comes to like astrological courses. And this is a great course for beginning to kind of almost intermediate astrologers. And so there's only 7 spots left already. So if you want to jump in and take this course, there's information about it down in the link in the description below. It's very detailed. It's going to be 12 weeks long, and it integrates pre-recorded lecture with like live classroom time, and you get unlimited access to email me and ask me questions. And so I'm really proud of this course. I've been developing it for a couple of years now, and every time I do it again, it gets better and better. And my students give me great feedback, and they all seem to learn a lot. So I'm excited to do it again. It's one of my favorite courses to teach. So again, you can find that information down in the description below. It tends to fill up very quickly. So if you are somebody who wants to learn in a small group setting and learn from me, now is your chance. Get in on that. Yeah, so that's what's going on there. I don't really have a lot of other announcements besides that. If you are a Pisces sun sign, your sun sign forecast is now available. And if you are an Aries sun sign, your 2-hour sun sign solar return forecast is available for pre-order, and that will be released on March 1st. And those are my announcements. So you can find links to those down in the description below as well. All right, so let's get into the forecast for all 12 zodiac signs. All right, beginning, of course, with Aries, per usual. All right, so for Aries and for Aries rising, this Mercury retrograde up until March 4th will be a very introspective time for you. This would be an excellent time to go on some sort of writing retreat or spiritual retreat, or to just spend time in your own sort of zone, spending time away from the world, spending time journaling, meditating, doing any sort of introspective work is going to be very fruitful to you. Relying more on your intuition rather than your logical linear mind can be especially fruitful for you during this time. So if you're somebody who's usually very rational in their thinking, this is a time for you to kind of step outside of your rational mind. And your rational mind might not work as well right now. You're going to be thinking more in terms of daydreams, visions, impressions, downloads, that type of energy. This is also a really sort of fantastical energy that has you sort of daydreaming about maybe your idealistic future plans, or just daydreaming in general a lot. So you might find that your mind is elsewhere. Your dreams will be very vivid. People sometimes make fun of me. I was expecting more than dream journals, but dream journals are important for when you have Mercury retrograding in your 12th house, because you're going to have a lot of old information coming back around that's important for you to understand, that can come through symbolism or messages in dreams or in meditation, things of that nature. So this is a really great time for you to engage in something like that if you don't already, because your dreams will probably be strange and vivid, and you'll have a lot of important information coming through. This would be a time where you might have to revisit some sort of information involving 12th house institutions like hospitals, prison systems. You might have to revisit information about something involving like a rehabilitation center facility, spiritual retreat centers, like temples and monasteries and things like that. And so an example of this would be like maybe you were in the hospital a while back, and you get all of a sudden some sort of written communication from the hospital. There was an error with your bill or something like that, or you have to go back and get some additional testing at this time. And so those are the types of like real life sort of practical things that might happen on a more mundane level for Aries and Aries rising in particular. All right, and for Taurus rising. So you guys are going to have Mercury going retrograde in your 11th house of friends. and social networks. And so this is a time where you might be revisiting old communications or old discussions or disagreements even with friends or groups of people that you surround yourself with by choice, your social circle. And, you might actually come to some sort of positive resolution to old disagreements within your friend circle or social circle at this time. So this is a really great time for that. This is also a time for you to revisit your associations with an old group that you might have lost contact with in the past, or to revisit like a professional association or some sort of networking group, something like that. And you can have a lot of really, positive energy that can come from engaging with that. This would also be a time to sort of relax your mind and disengage by just doing things that are fun and creative within your social circle. But this is a time where you can also have a lot of weird miscommunications with your friends and social networks. And so initiating important communication related to group activities is not necessarily advisable at this time, but revisiting old communications is. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But there might be some deception that comes up that you realize that maybe occurred in the past, and now you're fully aware of it. And so you have to sort of resolve or deal with that information during this Mercury retrograde period. And that can cause, a little bit of difficulty or discontent. All right. And then for Gemini and for Gemini rising. So this Mercury retrograde is going to be hitting the mutable signs a little bit harder, and that includes Gemini, because it's occurring in a mutable sign. And so what that means is that it's going to be squaring your ascendant, sun, or moon, depending on what you're listening to. I highly recommend listening for your ascendant specifically. But this Mercury retrograde is going to be occurring in your 10th house, which is the house of career and public reputation. Anytime you have Mercury retrograding in one of the angular houses, which are the 1st, 4th, 10th, and 7th, you're going to be feeling the impact much more strongly, and it's going to be much more of a predominant energy. And so for you, this is going to be potentially having to deal with some miscommunication, lies, or deception in the workplace. This could also bring a lot of confusion to you personally, and when it comes to your goals and your direction related to your career path. And so you might have some sort of identity crisis or confusion about what your role is within your company, especially for those who are a Gemini, sun, moon, or rising, and especially that rising sign anywhere from 12 to 30 degrees in the sign of Pisces or Gemini. You're going to be feeling this very strongly on a personal level, where things are just going to be extra confusing for you. You're going to have a difficult time with your language and with your thought processes and your ability to communicate effectively. And you might have some very confusing situations that come up in communication in one-on-one situations, or you might have some sort of confusion or deception or difficulty in relating to other people on a one-on-one basis in terms of contractual agreements, things like that. This is not a good time to sign business contracts, in particular for Gemini risings. I would say even for those who have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, just because of this T-square that's being formed with your ascendant and descendant, definitely not the best time for business contracts, agreements, things like that. What this is good for, though, is revisiting old difficult communications on a one-on-one basis. And so you could revise an old contract. It might be challenging to do so. You might not have a lot of clarity at first, but this is a time for you to really hone in on what you want when it comes to moving forward with the agreement or the renegotiation after Mercury turns direct. If you are in a relationship romantically, this is a time to revisit old disputes and arguments and miscommunications from the past, maybe deception that comes back around and starts bugging you again, and to address it, right? And finalize this and sort of move past it once and for all, to talk it out. And to go back and revisit to get some clarity. And so those would be good things to do to sort of work with the energy of the Mercury retrograde instead of working against it. Think about ways that you can overcome challenges by revisiting communications, by revisiting contracts, by revisiting information that you might have forgotten about that you can bring back around that might help you to resolve these issues. All right. For Cancer and for Cancer rising. Now for the water signs, this is a little bit different than for the mutable signs. Although Pisces is mutable water, we'll get into what that's going to bring. But for the water signs, this is going to be a more positive Mercury retrograde. And that's because Mercury is actually retrograding in a water sign. It's retrograding in Pisces, which means that it will be in a nice trine with your ascendant or your sun or your moon, if that's what you're listening for. Although I highly recommend listening for the ascendant as the primary influence. And so for you, this is happening in your 9th house of foreign travel, of education and higher knowledge and wisdom, and the wisdom that you gain through experience. And so this could be a really great time to revisit old educational pursuits, or to sort of revise, or not revise, but go back over old curriculum or old information that you gained through past educational experiences, because you might find some really incredible nuggets of like knowledge and wisdom that you can reintegrate into your experience that you might have lost in the past. This is a good time for you to take a step back and view the world more through the lens of like a holistic vantage point of everything being connected and being synchronistic and having some sort of meaning on that level, because that's going to really help you to gain a new perspective on life, or to revisit an old perspective that was really serving a good purpose in your life that you might have lost. This is also a time where you might have some sort of old travel plans or old connections with people in foreign countries that might come back around that you might need to revisit. And so that could be part of this energy too. In terms of travel plans, as long as you sort of have everything set and have your ducks in a row prior to this Mercury retrograde, this actually shouldn't be the worst for travel. There might be some delays and some miscommunications or some difficulties that come along the way, but they're going to be minor annoyances in the big picture. And this is really just going to help you to feel better overall. Kind of taking a step back and reflecting and seeing things from a bird's eye view is going to help you to have a better perspective on your life and your direction in life. And if you are somebody who's like a teacher or a writer who publishes, writing and things like that, this is a really good time to kind of sit back and just sit with what you've written or the curriculum that you've created and reflect on it. It's not a time to actively maybe change things. You might want to a little bit here and there, but it's a good time to reflect back. And, through that process, I think you're going to really strengthen what it is that you're trying to convey to other people. And it's going to be just better understood by others. All right, and then for Leo and for Leo rising. So for you guys, this energy is happening in your 8th house, which is a more difficult house. It's the house that deals with death, transformation. It's the house that deals with taxes, and we're coming into tax season in the United States here. It is the house that deals with death. It's the house that deals with death. It's the house that deals with endings. It's the house that deals with really intense traumatic situations and our innermost fears and anxieties. And so these are all things that might come up in your conscious, rational mind throughout this time. This is a time to revisit old fears and old anxieties and old traumas, and to maybe talk it out, or, engage in some form of therapy, or to journal about it, to let it out so you can sort of work through it once and for all. This is also a really great time to, if you are submitting tax paperwork during the Mercury retrograde, which if you are somebody who's able to wait, I recommend waiting. So if you can wait. If you can't, triple and quadruple check every single thing that you do. There could also be unexpected bills, especially bills related to debt, that come up or come back around at this time, and that can be kind of unsettling or confusing, and they could be like wrong, right? You could get like a bill for a couple $1,000s that makes no sense to you, and you're like, where did this come from? So you might have to kind of go in and communicate and negotiate and figure things out, with whoever it is that's charging you this money. This would not be a really great time to make clear sound investments. There might be a lot of confusion to that end, or there might be some sort of confusing miscommunication that comes in involving joint finances through marriage or your partner's resources. And so when it comes to all things financial, just quadruple check everything and make sure that you have your ducks in a row. This would be a really great time though to rebalance your budget, or to get everything in order for your taxes, or for just in general keeping track of your resources. But when Mercury goes direct, just double check it, and then you can move forward with whatever it is you need to actively do in that area. And so that is what's going on for Leo. For Virgo and for Virgo rising, this is happening in your 7th house. And so this is going to be a little bit more challenging for Virgos than for other signs. Not quite as challenging for some as it will be for some of the other mutable signs like Gemini and Sagittarius in particular, but it's still a confusing time. One-on-one situations can be very strange and very confusing. There can be lies that come up, intentional deception, or it could just be that you were confused and misunderstood, or somebody misrepresented themselves, maybe not even intentionally. And so you want to kind of just be aware of that energy. So that way, when you're engaging, especially in new contacts or contracts with people who you maybe are not super familiar with, you need to realize that what you see and what you hear from them now is not going to be the whole picture. So what you see is not what you get when it comes to new one-on-one situations or interactions with people. So this could be new clients, new business contracts, new relationships that are just like friendships and things like that. This is also a time where there could be a lot of miscommunication in one-on-one romantic partnerships. And so you want to just make sure that you're being very clear in the way that you are conveying information to your partner, and that you are making sure that you understand what they're saying as well. And so a really great practice for this Mercury retrograde, because it's a re-energy, right? All those re-words. Repeat what you've said in a different way, so paraphrase it. And then when your partner, and this could be business partnerships too, but when your partner says something to you, even if you think you're clear on it, if it's something important, repeat what they said, but paraphrase it in the way that you understood it. So, an example would be like, I'm going to take care of let's think of something basic. Like I'm going to take care of the recycling, right? And you say, okay, so you are going to sort and clean out and take the recycling to the center. That's what you're going to do, right? Make sure you're clear on everything that they're going to do, so that way you're not missing something and ending up in an argument. I know that's a really mundane sort of basic example, but kind of reflecting back what they said, but in more detail and in the way that you understood it. So hopefully that makes sense what I'm trying to say there. And so that would be a really great practice during this time. And it could come up that you've been lied to or deceived in some way, or that somebody misrepresented themselves. And so just kind of be aware of that. I think you'll be able to resolve this energy really easily, just because there will be a lot of good energy coming in throughout this Mercury retrograde via aspects to the outer planets. But it's just good to be clear, especially because you're a Virgo. You're going to want that precision that might be harder to come by. All right. And for Libra rising, this is an interesting one. So Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 6th house, which is the house of work and daily routines. For those who are not Mercury retrograde people, this is going to be very disruptive to your daily routines and to your day-to-day work experience. There can be miscommunications about your job or what's expected of you in terms of important projects or the steps to complete a project. There could be miscommunications with emails at work or amongst your coworkers. And so there can be a lot of confusion that comes up because of like weirdly worded emails and phone calls and messages that maybe don't get sent or don't go all the way through. And so this can cause a little bit of a disturbance. Usually when Mercury's in retrograde in the 3rd or in the 6th house, that's when you're really feeling it the most in terms of just day-to-day annoyances. So this can just make your day-to-day work experience super annoying. You'll probably be busier than normal, but there'll be like a lot of confusion and you'll feel really scattered. This is also you just being off in la la land and daydreaming instead of focusing on the task at hand, which can cause you to make a lot of mistakes in your work. And so that's just something to be aware of. If you are a Mercury retrograde person, I found that this is a really important time where your work flows a lot more easily. Communication related to work comes together. And so anything related to your job or to your work, especially on that day-to-day level, you have the clarity of mind to actually follow through with things and to make sure that everything is going really smoothly. So you might play that role in your workplace. Like everyone else is like, what the heck is going on? They're like floating off into the ethers, and you're the only one who has your feet on solid ground and who's able to think rationally and piece everything together. So if you are a Mercury retrograde person, just expect to have to take on that role if you work with others. And, you know, in general, this is a really great time for revisiting anything involving your health, your day-to-day nutritional or workout routines, where you can kind of go back and revisit old routines that worked really well for you, or to revise your current routine to make it more successful in creating health and vitality overall. All right. And Scorpio rising. So for you guys, this is happening in your 5th house, which is the house of fun. It's the house of joy. It's the house where you go to play. And so this is not the worst energy for Scorpio risings. I know last year when this happened for me, it was opposing my sun, so I had a lot of mishaps related to my career. The sun is the ruler of my 10th house. But the things that went really well for me were everything that was fun and that felt good, and my husband and I had a lot of really incredible, just enjoyable experiences exploring like our new location and things like that, going to the hot springs, going, you know, and visiting different places. It was a lot of fun, as long as I wasn't working. And so for you guys, this is a great time to engage in things that bring you joy. Engage in anything that you love to do because you love to do it, and disengage from your overthinking and over rationalizing from, you know, your normal sort of the monkey mind that we call it, where you're thinking and overthinking and your brain is all over the place, because your brain's going to be a little scattered and you're going to have a little bit of trouble piecing things together and understanding things on that rational, logical level. And that's mostly because your brain wants you to disengage and to just do things that you love. This is a great time to engage in spiritual or creative pursuits and practices of all kinds. This is a great time in general where you can reconnect with the things that you love to do the most, that you are the most passionate about, and to reintegrate that into your normal routine or experience, or to kind of think about that in terms of like a goal or direction that you have in life, and how you can integrate what you're passionate about into your goals, into your purpose, into what it is that you're pursuing. And this is a time where, you know, personally, you're going to be kind of daydreaming a little bit more. You're going to be a little bit more out in the ethers, but that's going to benefit you in a lot of ways. And so whatever it is that you're fantasizing about, you can actually, once Mercury goes direct, you can bring it more into reality. All right, and for Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. So for you guys, you're going to have this Mercury retrograde in your 4th house, which is the house of the home, family, property, your place of living. This is a time where there can be a lot of confusion around issues related to property or to your home. And so you might get some sort of confusing message from a landlord or from like your mortgage company or something like that, where it's kind of like, what the heck is going on here? And how do I resolve this? This could be issues involving like property taxes or things like that too that could come up that could be really confusing and difficult to navigate. My best advice here is, if you have to deal with it more intuitively as opposed to trying to do it rationally, or if you can, wait until mid-March when Mercury goes direct to address these things fully. But if it needs to be addressed now, address it now. This could be where you have to kind of go back and revise things when it comes to renovation projects or things that you've done in your home. This could be where there are mishaps in the home, where things break and you have to kind of fix them, and then they get fixed wrong, and then you have to call someone else, and it turns into a whole big thing. And so that can be a little bit of an annoyance. It can delay your plans when it comes to your home. If you are somebody who's doing home renovations, like my husband, who's a Sagittarius rising who listens to these videos, maybe not the time to initiate, but the time to go back and revise and finish projects that have been left undone. That was a very specific thing, but it might apply to other people as well. And then, you know, in terms of the way that this involves your family and your relationships with your family, there might be miscommunications. You might get mixed messages from family members. You might misconstrue what somebody's trying to tell you, and that might cause conflict or difficulty in your family relationships. This is also not the time to negotiate any important contracts related to your home or your property, or that involve family members. It's best to hold off or to wait on that, even if you are a Mercury retrograde person, just because there is that T-square going on between your ascendant and your descendant. And for those who have your Sagittarius rising, between 12 and 30 degrees, you're going to be feeling this more intensely than other Sagittarius risings. And so this could indicate a lot of miscommunication just in general on one-on-one situations or involving contracts or agreements. And so you don't want to just jump in and pursue these things flat out. Thinking back to that Mercury retrograde last year in Pisces and what came up around contracts or agreements, especially written communication, that was confusing or difficult, that you had to kind of go in and navigate these murky waters, that might come back around. And so you might have to deal with a similar energy. All right. And then for Capricorn and for Capricorn rising. So for you guys, this is another one where it's a nicer energy because you'll have Mercury retrograding in your third house of communication, which is annoying. It's definitely one of the more annoying placements of the Mercury retrograde. However, it is one that can prove to be the most beneficial because these delays and miscommunications serve a purpose to help you to have better contracts and agreements and relationships with the people that you're communicating with. And so this is a really great time to go back and revisit old things that you've written and sort of edit or revise them in some way. You can repurpose them and make them new again too. That's something that, Capricorns and Cancers, two Cancer risings, could do really effectively. This is a really great time to go back and revisit an old syllabus or an old, or some sort of old academic information, or to reread a book that you really love and enjoy, and you'll understand it a little bit better this time around. This is a really great time, especially for creative forms of ideas and communication, but not necessarily the best time for planning things out and thinking things through on a logical level. This is where you'll probably have a lot of miscommunication on a day-to-day basis, but it's really asking you to slow down and to kind of take a step back and to view things more intuitively and to view things more creatively and to spend some time in introspection and reflection rather than spending time just expressing yourself through communication all day, every day. So kind of taking a step back from that. And this is also a really great time where you can revisit important communications in all important relationships, right? So work-related partnerships, important business and contractual agreements, and especially in romantic partnership, where you can revisit old ideas that you have or plans for your future, or you can reopen old communications about important things. Like maybe there's something that you guys want to do together and you kind of table the discussion, and now you can speak more freely and openly and really come to a better solution. So when Mercury goes direct, you can actually achieve your goals and plans together. So overall, a good energy, as long as you don't let those minor day-to-day annoyances get you down. If you focus less on that and you take that as a sign that you need to pull back and focus more on your relationships, as opposed to all that, communication that we do so much in our day-to-day lives these days, then it should go pretty smoothly for Capricorns. For Aquarius and for Aquarius rising. So for the first part of this retrograde all the way through to March 4th, this Mercury retrograde will be happening in your second house, which is a little bit more of a difficult energy because it usually causes difficulty involving your finances. This could be a great time to go back and rebalance your budget, to figure out a better way to budget your resources, or to return things that no longer serve you. This is also a great time for like thrift shopping or getting really good deals on things that are old and repurposing them. That's something that you could do. This is a time also where sometimes people find money that they like stored away somewhere, and it just kind of comes back up, or they like lost something like a material possession of value and they find it all of a sudden. And so that's something that can be a positive expression of the Mercury retrograde, and especially with the positive aspects that it'll be making later this month. That's something that could potentially happen for you. You can find something in your home, maybe when Mercury sextile Uranus on February 28th. And so you can kind of you'll like be just kind of hanging out or cleaning your house or something, and like a really expensive piece of jewelry that you lost or something like that you can find, or you can find like $100 like in your pocket. So put that out there, manifest that. But there can also be difficulty and challenges related to your resources where maybe you were confused about your money management. You thought you had more resources, or you have an unexpected expense that throws things off. You can have old bills and old expenses come back around, or you can have something old that needs to be fixed and repaired around this time that can cost you some money. There can be miscommunications or confusion about money that's supposed to be coming in, or there could be issues with your direct deposit. So you just want to make sure, if that's something that's going to be a huge issue for you, like if you don't have the resources to spare, double and triple check everything that comes in and comes through, and make sure that you're on top of it before it becomes a big issue. All right. And then for Pisces and for Pisces rising, you guys are going to be in the spotlight the next couple of weeks. I'm already about to record next week's forecast because I'm going to be traveling during the Mercury retrograde. But it's all about you these next 2 weeks. And so finally, Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac who always has to wait for their forecast till the very end, you're going to be getting a lot of action and a lot of attention. And so Mercury going retrograde in your sign, not necessarily the greatest energy, because it can cause a lot of miscommunication that's directed toward you, or it can cause you to say things that are super confusing that you don't realize that you're saying in that way, or that you don't realize it's being taken in a certain way. So people might accuse you of lying or deceiving them, even like on an intentional level when it wasn't intentional. And so this is a good time to just practice being very clear about what you want and what you're saying to people, what you're trying to convey in relationships, and just making sure that you're very clear in your understanding of what other people are telling you. And so the same practice that I said for, that I described for Virgos and for Virgo risings would be very helpful for Pisces in navigating this energy. And so that would be sort of reflecting back to the person what you think they said. So if somebody tells you an important piece of information, paraphrase it and reflect it back in your own words in the way that you took it and understood it every single time during this Mercury retrograde. Reflect, right? Rephrase it, and make sure that you're very clear in what they said to you. Same thing goes for when you communicate something. Ask them, not in a rude way, because I know that this can be kind of abrasive or conveyed in a certain light, when I do it at least, with my Mercury opposite Mars, but ask them to repeat back what they heard you say, right? And just say, especially if it's something important, like if it's for work or something that really matters, just say, okay, just to make sure we're clear, what did I tell you to do, or what do you feel like I told you to do, or just reflect back to me what I just said, just to make sure that I was really clear, because I'm concerned that I wasn't. Find a way to say it nicely, but have them reflect back to you, This is a really great time for Pisces in particular to take a mental vacation. So to kind of kick back and relax and reflect. And this is a time, especially up until the 18th of February, for introspection in general for Pisces, because you're coming into that solar cosmic reset, especially for those Pisces rising and sun signs. Pisces sun signs, you're preparing for your solar return. So this is already a good time for deep introspection and reflection on what matters to you most and what's occurred through the past solar year, so you can figure out how you want to navigate the new year. What do you want to let go of, and what do you want to bring in next year? And if you need help figuring out what your goals and your direction will be in the year ahead, I do have a 2-hour solar return sun sign forecast available for you down in the description below. And so you'll get a lot of detailed information about what's coming up for you in the year ahead. For those who have your Pisces rising, that's going to be hit by this. This is a time still of that introspection, because the sun is finishing up its transit through your 12th house, which is a hidden house. It's the house of relaxation. It's the house of reflection. It's more of a subconscious area, and it's coming onto your ascendant, where you're going to be in the spotlight this month, way more so than you normally are. Things are going to be illuminated. You're going to be illuminated. You're going to be reinvigorated, re-energized, and you're going to be ready to put yourself out there more. And so this is a good time with Mercury stationing this week to reflect on what you want to move forward with, because that's going to be the big theme for next week when the sun moves into your sign and you have the new moon in Pisces. So this week is introspection, reflection, kind of kicking back, taking a mental vacation, or even a physical vacation or a break, because next week it's going to be like your time to shine, your time to initiate new beginnings in a powerful way. And you want to make sure that you're mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared for that. So give yourself permission to rest, relax, do those Piscean things that people always give you some crap for, you know, like just kind of disconnecting from day-to-day life and floating off into the ethers, because that's going to serve you this week. And so that's what's going on for Pisces and for Pisces rising. All right, you guys. And so that was my forecast for all 12 zodiac signs. It's going to be an interesting Mercury retrograde. I kind of like the energy of this Mercury retrograde. I'm not super concerned about it on a just sort of general level. Everybody will be impacted a little bit differently. So some of you guys might have harder aspects to some of your other planets going on in the chart, and that might change the energy a little bit. But overall, not the worst Mercury retrograde. Even though it is in the sign of Pisces, if you allow yourself to disengage and to not approach things directly and rationally, if you allow yourself time for surrender and for rest and reprieve, especially on a mental level, this is going to be a great time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this forecast. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share this with anybody who you feel like could benefit from this information, because it's always nice to help your friends. And also follow me on Instagram. I'm doing like updates all the time, so you can see what's going on in the astrology. And also I just sometimes post things about what's going on, you know, with me and things like that, if you want to get to know me a little bit more personally. And this is a really great place. I've been loving Instagram. I was avoidant of it for a very long time, but I've been loving it because it's been really great for connecting with a really good like spiritual community. Everyone's so supportive, and everyone's like just sharing each other's work and saying, oh, what a great job. It's actually like a nice little community on there. So anyway, I will see you guys next time.